We talk a lot on this show about the nightmare that is renting and mass exploitation by landlords. But in researching a separate show I host, it's called Crash Course with Michael Walker. I've been talking to lots of people and discovering just how bad it is. It's worse than even I expected. So I want to show you now a part of an interview. This is a conversation with Anna Oppenheim, who was looking for a flat this summer.
I've been renting in London for 10 years. I've lived in 7 different properties. And normally, look, everyone complains about London renting, right? It's expensive. The quality of the properties is often not very good. But in terms of availability, that wasn't the issue. Normally, if you apply for 2 or 3 places, you'll get one with a proper viewing, and you can negotiate maybe slightly around move-in days, things like that. Whereas now, it was trying to find a place to live was like a full-time job. And that was not about like getting a cheapest possible rent. That was just like literally to like have a place to sleep, where we ended up sofa surfing. We ended up like taking time off work for the search. It took us, something like 3 months to find a place to live.
I've heard some real horror stories, people having to attend these sort of mass viewings. You've got 30 people competing for the attention of the landlord. You've got people paying just to view properties. That's the bit I find the most sort of like surprising. I mean, did you have to do that? Did you have to pay to view a property?
Yeah, we got asked that several times, that in order to even apply for a viewing, you're asked to pay a deposit up front, a deposit which you don't get back if you see the property, you decide you don't like it. That could be 200, 300, 400 pounds. Once you got asked to pay £1,000 without even having seen the place. At the time we decided not to do it. There was too much of a risk. But then we actually regretted that because, what if you had paid? Maybe you would have a place to live and not having to spend like weeks of our lives still searching with no secure place to stay. We didn't really even apply for any property without offering above the listed price. We were told by estate agents it's the standard now, basically. So sometimes, we would see a property that's already expensive, offer 200 more per month, and then get told that someone else offered 500 more, so you won't get it.
So this is completely wild. Like, I was blown away. People are being asked to pay £1,000, not as a deposit on a house that they've already looked at, decided to live in, to view a property. And then if they say, oh, actually, I don't want the property, and the landlord says, but I do want to give it to you, they don't get it back. Right. So how it normally works is you say, oh, all right, I give them 400 quid for this, and then they end up giving the property to someone else because it's so competitive out there. But if they want to give the property to you and you don't want it, they keep your money for looking at a house. Luckily I haven't had to look for a house this year. I did have to take a 15% rent increase, but we decided to take it because we didn't want to enter this disastrous market out there. But people who have had to look for houses this year, it's like, not only are you paying someone loads of money for not really doing anything, all they did was they were lucky enough to have enough capital to buy a house, right? Giving them a third or a half of your income every month. But you have to like beg on your knees for the right to live there and for the right to give them half your income every month. So you're paying them hundreds of pounds to view a property. Then you've got this listed price. Now, I normally, when I'm sort of renting, you look at the listed price and you say, oh, do you think we could offer them £50 below? If you really like the place, obviously you don't because you want it. You don't want someone else to get it. If you're not that sure, you say, well, maybe if it was 100 quid less, we would take it. So you offer that, you try. Now you have to say, this is the listed price. I'm going to give you £200 more. Then you offer to give them £200 more. Someone else has given them £500 more. Someone else has given them a year's rent in a bag full of cash. It is outrageous. And whereas sort of people's mortgage rates rising can bring down a government, I think in many ways it was the increase in interest rates and the effect that would have on mortgage holders that meant that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng had to go, right? They brought down a government. When it comes to renters who've been living through this renters have always got a raw deal, but it's been particularly exceptionally bad this year. Barely a ripple. Ash, I want your thoughts on this. Have you ever heard of people having to pay to view a property?
No, not until this year. There has been a sharp increase in the number of horror stories that have been reaching my ears in the last 12 months. And I think that the reasons are multiple. Is that one, you've got some landlords selling up. They're being impacted by interest rates. And that's because many landlords basically hold interest-only mortgages. So they're like, you know what, fuck this, I'm going to sell up. And also the second thing is that you've had a Wild West environment for so long that there is no accountability. There is no restraint on the actions of landlords. There is a sort of bottomless pit of profiteering. And the only thing that affects is the, living standards and quality of life of their tenants. They don't really care about that. One of the great lies of capitalism is that markets are rational. And because they're as a whole rational, they'll become self regulating to, if not a whole extent, then at least a significant one. And I think that what you see with the rental market is that that's not the case. Because you have a two-tier system of housing, what you have is that if you've got enough capital to hand, or you at least did in the 1980s and 1990s, you were able to get on what I like to call the asset escalator, right? You jumped on it and you were able to see the value of that asset appreciate over years far and above any increase in your pay packet. So, what is it that pays more? Is it work, right? Is it income from work, or is it income from an asset, from wealth? Well, it's wealth. And if you're someone who didn't have that money to jump on the asset escalator, or maybe you're like me or you, and you just were simply born too late, then suddenly you're on this lower tier where you're paying every month the same amount that you would need to pay off a mortgage. Very often you're paying more than that, but because you didn't have that initial lump sum for a deposit or to buy outright, you're constantly digging yourself further into a hole and getting further away from being able to have, secure housing in a way which doesn't just impoverish you. You're not just pouring your money into a bottomless pit. And what landlords have realized is that there is no limit to how far you can push people. The jobs are concentrated in major cities, the educational opportunities are concentrated in major cities. So you're going to have young people who need a place to live in and around those major cities. And they're just going to make themselves poorer. They will, take on more debt. They'll borrow more money from their families if that's possible. They will just accept the fact that they won't ever be able to buy a house. And that's fine by the landlord class. So you don't have a rational self-regulating market. Actually, the rational thing to do as a landlord in terms of your own self-interest is just keep squeezing. Just keep on squeezing. So I think that what the kind of crisis we're seeing now is a direct result of successive governments, including new Labour governments, looking at the private rental market and going, you know what, fill your boots, have fun, profit as much as you want. And not going, okay, well, actually, for it to be this profitable to leverage your ownership over an asset over someone who doesn't own an asset, that's not a healthy way for an economy to run. So we're gonna tax it to the point where it's not really profitable to be a landlord. We're gonna make it easier for young people to access cheap and secure forms of tenancy. We're going to make sure that house prices don't spiral out of the reach of income increases. Successive governments have failed to do that, and that's why you've been lumped with this horrible rent increase. That's why Anna's being gouged for hundreds of pounds, if not £1,000, simply for a viewing. It's the result of government policy.